Everyone ready? I would like to introduce our next speaker, a very important figure in the history of well, I like to say polyglottery, but I think the correct term is really polyglottism. Barry Farber. Hello? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to stay out of the way here. Let me go over here. I apologize. He wrote the wonderful book, How to Learn Any Language. Which I know is something that a few of you pursue. And he also is important in the history of New York City language clubs. He founded the New York Language Club in 1984. Is that right, Barry? And he's going to speak now, and afterwards we're going to have a Q&A where you can ask him anything you want to know about how to learn any language. Thank you, Barry, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. And are we in the broadcast business? The first job is to get connected. Are we okay with the mic? Can you hear in the back? How can you, if you can hear me, please raise your hand. Okay, that's pretty good coverage, almost the whole room. I want to begin by telling the most frequently told joke in the world. I didn't say it was the funniest. I said it was the most frequently told. Right this minute, at least 100 people around the world are telling this joke to somebody. Here it goes. What do you call somebody who speaks 2 languages? Bilingual. What do you call somebody who speaks 3 languages? Trilingual. What if he speaks 4 languages? He is quadrilingual. And what do you call somebody who speaks only 1 language? An American, right? An American. We are at the bottom, and I want to express my gratitude for your having this conference, not in Serbia this time, not in, right here where we need it, right here where we need it. My love affair with language started at the age of 14 and never quit, never faded, always in ascendancy. I learned certain things, and they just started with my necktie and worked up to my neck. I learned that in Indonesian, when you want to make a plural, you just say the same word twice. And the Indonesian word for man is orang, O-R-A-N-G. Men is orang-orang, but when they write 1 orang and then put a 2 after it, so an Indonesian newspaper looks like an unending algebraic equation. I learned that a greeting in Japanese is Ohio, just like one of our American states. In Lithuanian, thank you is ačiū, just like a sneeze. I learned that in German, these are all little pieces of jewelry that you collect en route. I learned that in Germany, in the German language, a woman does not become feminine gender until her wedding day. When a baby girl is born, she is neuter gender, das Mädchen. As she grows up, she is das Fräulein, the young woman. Not until her wedding day does she become die Frau, achieving feminine gender finally. What language has done for me, it would take, give me a few days of your time, and I can begin to thank the language world for what I have done personally. Let me start with the most basic. Growing up as a boy in North Carolina, I preferred, nothing invidious about this, I sort of thought a woman with blonde hair was kind of nice, attractive. So you had to be a football player to date the blondes in Greensboro, North Carolina. I was not a football player. But I figured if I learn a blonde language and go there, that will escalate my chances. So I learned Norwegian. And then good, tremendous. Det gleder meg å høre der så mange nordmenn her I dag. Delighted that there's so many Norwegian lovers here today. So I went to Norway 4 times speaking Norwegian, looking for a wife. Didn't find one. Gave up. Came back and met and married a woman from Sweden, right next door to Norway, and just as blonde. Every bit as blonde. Introduced by a fraternity brother, a fellow North Carolinian. So language, she loved the fact that I tried to speak Swedish. She said, Barry, you speak Swedish well enough to convince a Norwegian that you're a Finn. You don't have to speak it well. It's the effort that counts. And in English, we talk about breaking the ice. That takes all day, breaking ice. With language in one word, well, let me make a bigger claim here. The reason that we, all of us who love languages, are in the best possible endeavor learning foreign languages. I could prove that in a courtroom, and here's how. In no other endeavor is there as big a gap between knowing nothing and knowing a little as in our endeavor, learning another language. I promise you, in brain surgery, there is a big gap between knowing a little and knowing nothing. If you know a little about brain surgery, you are nowhere near achieving anything. There is also a very minor, if you want to fly or service intercontinental jet aircraft, you may know nothing, but if you know a little, you still may as well know nothing. You have no gap between knowing nothing about flying a jet full of passengers, you know nothing, and if you learn a little, there's no gap there. But in our endeavor, learning a language, you break the ice. There is a world, a chasm between knowing nothing and knowing a little. Even one word. And you can prove that with your next ride in a New York cab. If you see the driver's name. If the driver's name has a familiar ring to it, if you recognize it as a Romanian name and know one word of Romanian, ce mai faci, how are you? You turn ice into steam without wasting time going through the stage of water. The ice is broken, melted, and turned into steam just by contacting, making a connection in their language. Even if you know one word, one phrase, what if you know 2 words? What if you know 2 phrases? I started studying an African language, Twi, T-W-I. It is the main language of the nation of Ghana. And the first time I met a cab driver from Ghana, if he's black and has an accent, you can assume he's from Africa. And he was. And I said, what country are you from? He said, Ghana. When I welcomed him to America in Twi, the first Ghana cab driver lost control. Here's a white dude speaking Twi. The second one almost hit a bus. I was waking up from an operation, and then there was a doctor, he was black, and he had a needle in my vein as I was waking up in the recovery room. And I said, through my fog, I said, "Doctor, where are you from?" He said, "I'm from Ghana." Well, remembering the experience of the others, and with that needle still in my arm, I didn't talk any twee to him until the needle was safely out of my arm. 1956, the Hungarian nation rises up against Soviet oppression. I, as a reporter, went over to the Hungarian border, but they weren't allowing newsmen to come out at night to watch the operation of bringing the refugees across the Einser Canal from Hungary into Austria in the Austrian city of Andau. And there was your Iron Curtain, your barbed wire, but Hungary had been in the hands of the freedom fighters for 10 days, and that was enough to turn the Iron Curtain to a Venetian blind. And I went to the head guy who was in charge of that operation, going across the canal in a rubber raft, filling it full of refugees, others pulling the refugee over to the Austrian bank, sending the boat back for more. About 40 to 50 in a batch, about 12 times a night. And I went to the room at a Peaks Gästehaus, a little inn. Nummer 19, the waitress said. That's where the action is. Number 19. I went there, knocked on the door, and a voice in accented English said, "Who is it?" I said, "I'm an American reporter," and he was cussing before he opened the door. He said, "You sacrificed son of a bitch. We let one of your guys on the border the night before, and he popped off a flash bulb, and the Russians could see where we were. We had to scatter. The refugees had to flee back into Hungary, and I promised we'd never let another." By that time, the door was open. And in the middle of his tirade, I saw a Norwegian flag on the wall of this inn in Austria. I interrupted him. I said, "Er du fra Norge? Are you from Norway?" He lost his audio. He said, "There are a pair of boots on the other side of the bed. See if they fit. You're going with us tonight." If it weren't for a foreign language, I would never have gotten that advantage in my chosen field in radio. A few years later, there was a reception line at the Waldorf Astoria for Willy Brandt, who was then Chancellor of West Germany. Germany was still divided. Willy Brandt fled the Nazis before World War II, but like so many who fled to Austria or fled to France, he didn't flee far enough. He fled to Norway. The Nazis took Norway. He joined the underground, married a Norwegian woman, and spoke Norwegian at home. Well, they spent at least 8 minutes telling us, we're going to have a receiving line. You can say, "Glad to meet you, Chancellor Brandt." You can shake hands, but you can't stop and talk. You can't do an interview. They repeated that about 12 times. So here we are in the receiving line. And I get to Willy Brandt, and I got my 5 seconds of connection with him. And I used it to say to him in Norwegian, "Mr. Brandt, I understand you speak Norwegian at home. That is most interesting." Willy Brandt held up the receiving line and gave me a 7.5-minute interview right there while everybody waited. Yeah, it worked. You know it works. You know it works. There are so many advantages to knowing a foreign language. Professionally, I've already talked about marriage. You may get a chance to meet my blonde daughters before we part company in a few minutes. The one thing that I like about it is impossible to learn the language without learning at the same time. something of the history of that country, the culture of that country, the outlook of that country, the mindset of that country. It's like a 6-year-old boy and his mother says, Johnny, wash your hands for dinner. And he said, gee, Mom, do I have to wash them both? And she thinks for a minute and says, no, just wash one hand. I want to see how you do it. I want to see how you learn a language without learning something about the people. I was warned, Barry, they know that for 55 years you've been a conservative on radio. Most of these people do not meaning you, do not think of themselves as conservatives. They think of themselves as liberals. We are, if you're a language lover, all that stuff is so far below you, you can't see the top of it with high-powered binoculars. You see that enemy soldier over there? I can't kill him. I don't want to kill him. I need him to teach me his irregular verbs. There's one story that I got firsthand, and it's about language, but it's about more than that. It's about a spirit that you've already shown me by your reaction. You have plenty of in this chamber right now. After World War II, Stalin decided to let the Greeks go home. Stalin, communism, they couldn't run a limousine service well for the communist hierarchy. So they brought the Greeks over, and they were very entrepreneurial, and the Greeks ran a great limousine service for the Kremlin, for the Communist Party. But after World War II, the Greeks wanted to go home. True story, I got it firsthand. There was an Estonian family, mother, father, daughter, and son. And their friend at Moscow said, look, I work for the train station. I can tell you when the Greeks are going to meet to be put on the train. I can tell you when. I can tell you they don't need any papers leaving Moscow. That's all I can tell you. If you want to take a chance, I can let you into that room and you can get put on that train with the Greeks. The Estonian family voted 4-0. They didn't want to live in the Soviet Union. They wanted to take a chance, even though the rest of their lives may be either very short or a very long, arduous life in Siberia in the Gulag. They voted 4-0 to try it. On the appointed day, they got to the train in Moscow, and their friends motioned them. They mingled with the Greeks. They got ushered onto the train with the Greeks. The train headed west. So far, so good. Nobody asked for any papers. Finally, as they approached the Polish border, a KGB plainclothesman kept looking at this family. They didn't look Greek. They were Estonians. Man called the father over and said, "Are you Greek?" Father said, "Yes." The Soviet police thug said, "Are you sure you're Greek?" He said, "Yes, I am." Then he called a real Greek over. They didn't know each other. Estonian didn't know the Greek fella. But the KGB guy said to the real Greek, "Talk to this man in Greek." And he did. And the Estonian father answered in Estonian. And the Greek smiled and spoke more Greek. And the Estonian smiled and spoke more Estonian. And the Greek kept talking Greek, and the Estonian kept talking Estonian. They fell into each other's arms as though they hadn't seen each other since kindergarten in Thessalonica. And the thug grunted and walked away. And they made it to the free world. God bless the Greeks who understood the message. The message. Many of you are from foreign countries. You have it over us, all over us. but Khrushchev said, we will bury you. I don't know what he meant. I think it was allegorical. I like to think that. But I'm making that threat now because this conference is part of my evidence. We are on the trail. We are going to be very good. You know, English only became our language by one vote in the Continental Congress. There was such hatred of King George III that we wanted, there was a big element there that wanted to go Dutch, speak Dutch, and German had a big lobby. English won by one vote. And we now know our secret. I'll give it to you right now. Here's why we're going to catch up with you around the world and break ahead. Americans have the following advantage. We are the only people in the world who enjoy speaking a foreign language badly. You Europeans are perfectionists. Unless you speak a language well, you won't admit you speak it at all. It's like inviting somebody into your bedroom before the bed is made, before lipstick is put away. No, we don't mind. We don't enjoy speaking a language perfectly any more than we enjoy speaking a foreign language badly. It is our secret weapon. I grew up hating grammar, and that is a very bad way to be if you want to learn languages. I thought grammar was like algebra. It was hard, it was unnecessary, and I thought it would go away. I really, honest to God, thought grammar was something they had to teach for a few days just to make everything sufficiently boring, and then it would fade away, and we'd get back to learning the languages again. I love that part, vocabulary, but not grammar. Hated it. The grammar is the very constitution of a foreign language. You've got to know it. I don't hate it anymore, but I remember those days, even in college English, in college grammar, I remember the teacher yelling, "No, Mr. Farber, pregnant is not the past tense of virgin." It had nothing to do with each other. Another great thing language did, I'm leaving out a lot of free things. Do you know how many Chinese restaurants we have in New York? We have 7,500. Maybe changed now, but until lately they all had one thing in common. If you said anything to them in Chinese, something appeared on your table that did not appear on your check. And it's so easy. Thank you is xie, xie. Same word twice. Xie, xie. And chopsticks and kuaizi, kuaizi. There it is. You just use those two words. I've had Chinese restaurants in New York do everything from give everybody a nice little slug of Chinese brandy clear up to picking up the tab for a whole party of 6. Good things happen, and you deserve those good things when you go to the trouble of learning the other guy's language. But once I did an interview show, still do in my 55th year. Somebody introducing me at a speech the other day said, "I'm not saying Farber's been around a long time, but if you look at that portrait of the Last Supper, he's third from the right." And I loved what languages represented. I just wish there was some place I could go and offer a donation to the whole institution of foreign languages for what they've done for me. Well, a movie came along, pure trash, exploitation. In the 60s, there was something called the sexual revolution. And Sweden got the reputation as being the sexiest country in the world. You had the impression all the Swedes did was crawl all over each other all day long. And there were these 2 film producers. They produced a documentary, and the documentary was showing how sex begins in Sweden very early. So I had them on the air. I agreed to have them on, and I saw the documentary. And one of the documentary filmmakers said, you see, you heard the young lady say, in Sweden, we have our first sexual experiences at the age of 14. What a moment. Here I was with this hick North Carolina accent. He said, you heard the girl say in Sweden, and in Swedish, we have our first sexual experiences at the age of 14. And I said, that's not what she said. She said, vi har vår första sexuella undervisning för ålder 14. We have our first sexual instruction, meaning in school, at the age of 14. If there were her sexual experiences starting at the age of 14, she wouldn't have said våra första undervisningar. She would have said våra första erfarenheter. Well, they lost their audio, the technical knockout. Who expects an American talk host to be able to catch them in a lie, even in a lie that vicious? Now, the one thing that has held us up, I want to see what time it is, but we do want to leave a little time for questions. There was a fear, like I accuse most foreigners, not just Europeans, as refusing to speak a language unless they speak it well. No, I say get in there and talk. And in my seminars over the years on how to learn a foreign language, I kept emphasizing the parable of the parrot, P-A-R-R-O-T, the parrot. Man's looking for a 14th anniversary present, 14th year anniversary present for his wife. And he was walking in the mall by a pet shop, and he hadn't really intended to spend a lot of money, but there was a parrot in the window. The parrot cost $7,000 because that parrot spoke 14 different languages. The man said to himself, 14 languages, 14 years of marriage, he couldn't help himself. He went in, pulled out his credit card, bought the parrot, took it home, put a perch up in the kitchen, put the parrot on the perch, forgot the bird seed, ran back down to the pet shop to get the bird seed, ran back home, and his wife greeted him. She had come home, thrust herself upon him with uncommon affection, and said, darling, what a wonderful gift for my anniversary. You remembered how much I love pheasant. Now, I got him plucked. I got him slit. He's in the oven. He'll be ready in about half an hour. And the man was standing there in shock and said, you got him what? You got him where? That was no pheasant. That was a parrot. And what's more, that parrot cost $7,000 because that parrot spoke 14 languages. And the wife said, so why in the hell didn't you say something? And that's what we say to you. If you're learning a language, say something. If you know what time it is, ask what time it is anyhow. If you can see 18 free tables, ask the maitre d' in French if he has any free tables. Get in there and speak the language. Sometimes they ask me what my favorite moment was as a language student. It was in Hungary, right after we got some of those refugees out. We got 200,000 refugees before it was over. And when they got to the Air Force base where they were housed in Munich, the Luitpold barracks in Munich, they simply put their Hungarian signs over the English signs and the German sign. I didn't mind it. I thought it was fascinating. I'd never seen those words before. Instead of doctor, there was orvos, Hungarian. Instead of clothing, there was ruha. And then, that was all nice. And then I went looking for the men's room. And I saw the two doors, but the words on those two doors were Fairfiak and Nook. Fairfiak and Nook. I didn't know whether I was a Nook or a Fairfiak. And I was standing there like a language detective. And I said, let's pretend the K just makes it plural. So then we've got Fairfiak and Nö. The Hungarian language I knew, again, this is one of these things you're going to learn whether you want to or not. It just comes to you. You learn it en route, no extra cost. The Hungarian, are you aware that 3 languages in Europe are not European languages? They are not members of the Indo-European family. Hungarian, Finnish, and Estonian are Asian in their origin. So I knew that Hungarian was originally an Asian language. That word nö, not no and not new. It has the umlaut dots. Nö means woman in Chinese. So I gambled. I went in the Fairfiak door, and there were 6 other Fairfiaks in there. I was just as happy, and I felt like I was one of the sharpest detectives in the history of the world. It really was a good feeling. You're entitled to have a language hero. My language hero is not one who speaks 40, 50, 60 languages, and there are such people. He was a colonel in the South Korean Army. And I got to know him fairly well. He was stationed in America. And I was at a Korean party one time, and I was talking about him. He was going to be the interpreter for an American officer addressing South Korean officers at like the South Korean West Point. And they were all wearing earphones, and this Colonel Pak, was going to speak and was going to interpret for this American major. Well, the American major may have been a very good major. He may have been very good militarily. But as a speaker, he had read somewhere that you should start off a speech with a joke. And he was telling a joke, and the colonel could tell where that joke was going. And it was not going to a good place. It was erotic, it was promiscuous, it was sadomasochistic. It was just loaded with bad taste. So my hero, the colonel, said to his South Korean cadets, our American guest is telling a story which is quite relevant in the American culture, but not in ours. He expects a laugh when he comes to the conclusion of his story. When he comes to that conclusion, I will let you know, at which point I want you all to laugh uproariously. And it worked. The deception worked. And the American major was proud as a dog with a hem-stitched tail. And after it was over, the colonel was driving the major back to his headquarters, and the American major said, you know, Colonel Pack, that speech, that it didn't take you as long to translate as it did for me to tell. How come? And the major said, well, you see, the colonel said, you see, Major, Korean is a very quick language. Well, wasn't that a great way to get out of that kind of trouble? Now, I want to take a couple questions before we say goodbye to each other. Ellen, is the timing about right?
Yes, it's great.
Thank you. Thank you. No, thank you. Now, Ellen, I really can't see well from here. Ellen, maybe you can help me.
Okay. I just want to ask that someone close to that microphone also grab that one and help me by going up and down, because I don't think I can cross over easily. So we'll alternate questions. Let's start on this side. I shouldn't hear.
So thank you for that. Very interesting. As English native speakers, we of course have the problem when we learn other languages that other people want to practice English very often with us, and it can be quite a challenge to persuade people, beg people, cajole people, threaten people even sometimes, and it's not always the most effective way to do it. What do you find has worked for you as a good way of getting other people to communicate?
Good question. You want to speak, you want language practice, but the one you're talking to wants English practice, and he has a way of prevailing. First of all, it is a bittersweet problem. English, like it or not, is the international language. When a Russian plane lands in China, the air does not talk to the ground in Russian. The ground does not talk to the air in Chinese. They speak English. And they did in the days of Stalin and Mao Zedong. It is the language of the air. Let's make the drama even more complex. If a plane takes off in southern Italy and flies to northern Italy, everybody in the drama is Italian, but the air does not speak to the ground in Italian, nor vice versa. They speak English with each other. I just come right out and put it on the front porch where the goats can get it. I say, I need practice in your language more than you need it in English. Do you mind? Try it and see how it works. And good luck to you. Interesting problem. Thank you.
Thank you for giving your talk, Mr. Farber. I'm also a 14-year-old, and you said that when you started you were 14. So before the accessibility and easiness of using the internet to learn languages, how did you learn them? And if books weren't available, what would you do to gain more exposure to the language? Thank you.
Very good question. I learned before, by the way, today, with the technological age, it is so much fun and so easy to hear the native speaker. And in our language classes, I could hardly sleep the day before my first Spanish class. I was levitating, not like the old Hindu masters. I was levitating only about 1.5 feet above the bed. I couldn't. I said, 24 hours from now, I'll be learning, I'll speak some Spanish. Well, 24 days after that, we hadn't learned any Spanish. We learned about grammar and adjectives follow the noun and agree with the noun and gender and I got frustrated. And I said, Miss Mitchell, when are we going to start learning Spanish? And she looked at me as though I had made an improper request. She said, you'll learn when you get to college. When I got to college, they said, you'll learn when you get to Mexico. We never got to the point. I had cassettes, but that's it. No video, no DVDs, nothing like you have today. But I just took advantage of everything. I wisely avoided mistakes of guessing. When I came to a word that I wasn't sure of, I didn't learn what I thought was correct. I waited until I found the right person. Now, I don't think I've given you enough protein yet. What exactly was the question? Couldn't put a fine edge on the question.
The question was basically before the internet, how would you gain more exposure to the language? What would you do without classes?
Grammar books, phrase books, dictionaries, an occasional movie that came to town, and mostly talking to other people. Now, in Greensboro, North Carolina, I found people who could speak every language I was learning. So if you're in a bigger city, Greensboro had 75,000 people. But I found somebody who spoke Spanish, and the guy who laid the carpet spoke Italian. It was very important to find a human who could explain. By the way, I want to, before time runs out, I want to thank Harry Lorraine, not a language expert, but a memory expert. you marrying his memory secrets with my language learning appetite took me from the ox cart to the jet. Now, do you believe that I can teach everybody in this chamber 5 words in 5 different languages within 1 minute? If somebody can keep time on me if you want to. Here we go. The Russian word for brother is brat. What a brat that brat of mine is. All the Spanish boys were crying. They can't play baseball. Why not? Because our ball is stuck in the tree. Tree, our ball. The tree is where our ball is stuck. Tree, our ball. Piring. Piring means plate in Indonesian. You go into an Indonesian restaurant, nobody's eating. There's no food there. They're just peering at those beautiful plates. Peering, plate, peering at the plate. Butter in Spanish, well, mantequilla. Everybody knows with all that cholesterol, butter is meant to kill you. Mantequilla. Mantequilla. In Hebrew, to speak, medaber. You're walking through the woods in Israel, and you met a bear who could speak. Speak, medaber. Okay, what's the Spanish word for tree? What is the Russian word for brother? What is the Spanish word for butter? What is the Indonesian word for plate? And what is the Hebrew word for speak? No, you see that? You can build a prodigious vocabulary. You can learn 25 words a day. Now, when you wake up the second day and you only remember 8 of those 25 words, don't worry, review them. You will eventually catch up with yourself and you'll realize 25 words a day and your vocabulary. And vocabulary is the answer to an awful lot of problems. If you have a big vocabulary, they don't mind, they'll excuse a grammatical mistake. But merely to get along, having a vocabulary, it's a blessing. And with this technique, it's a lot of fun to learn. I've never found any word yet that I couldn't put on this little language system that I just showed you.
Barry?
Yes.
We have one more question for you up here.
Go ahead.
Hi there, I'm a big fan. I was wondering if you, at the moment, are keeping up with the languages in which you already that you already speak. Are you learning any new languages? And since the last publishing of your book, have you changed your approach at all or added any techniques?
I'm sorry. Ellen, can you give me those points, or can you say those, recite those points again?
Are you learning any new languages now?
Yes, whenever a new wave hits New York, it comes in waves. When the Albanians came after the Kosovo War in the 1990s, I started Albanian because I have a chance to practice. When the African immigration was at its peak, and an awful lot of cab drivers are from Ghana, I could practice Twi. The only 2 languages that defeated me were Irish Gaelic and Finnish. Oh, my beloved Finnish. I haven't given up yet. And you know what noun cases are. You have 6 noun cases in Latin. You have 6 noun cases in Russian. You have 7 noun cases in Serbo-Croatian. In Finnish, my beloved Finnish, you have 15 noun cases in the singular and 16 in the plural. I was in my hotel room in Helsinki for 5 days trying to learn enough Finnish to get downstairs. Come on in. I don't just arbitrarily pick up a new language. When an opportunity to find practice comes to town, I like to rise up and meet it. And you don't have to know much. A little greeting will get you everywhere. Again, that's the magic of this endeavor. We are united. We are united in a very special endeavor. We know how to break the ice and turn the ice into steam without wasting time going through the stage of water. What a hobby. Did I hear you say you started when you were 14? I think somebody did. That was a good age that was a good age to get going. Now, if you're here to stop me, I've got one little short story. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. At the language club, we usually end our sessions by telling the language club joke in as many languages as are represented at our language club meeting. We don't have a club handshake. We don't have a club motto. We don't even have club dues. All we have is the language club joke. It goes like this. The two mice in the corner were hopelessly trapped. The big, fierce, hungry cat was just about to pounce. At the last possible instant, one of those mice cupped his little paws to his lips and went, ha, ha! The cat, thinking there was a dog in the room, turned around and ran away. And that mouse turned to the other one and said, you see, that's the advantage of learning another language. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
I'm so grateful to Barry for coming to this conference. It feels like I don't know. There's something that feels like a full circle in having a 14-year-old attendee ask someone who's been around a few more than 14 years, I guess, in the language learning world. That's very beautiful to me. And don't be jealous, but he's a neighbor. So after this, now that I've met him after this conference, I intend to stalk him. I'm sorry, Barry. I think I can speak for you in saying that you'll be glad to entertain questions out in the lobby. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. We need to get out now because there is a tech check happening in here, but thank you for coming.